Mario Balotelli. The man played football like he was conducting a social experiment on how much chaos one person could create. At Manchester City, he wasn't just unpredictable on the pitch, he was a walking disaster movie off it. This guy crashed his Audi R8 on the way to training, and when cops asked why he was carrying £5,000 in cash, he just shrugged and said, "I'm rich." But that wasn't even his weirdest weird. Balotelli threw darts at youth team players during training. Actual darts, at actual humans. The club reportedly fined him for the incident, but considering his infamous "I'm rich" shrug to police, it's hard to imagine that money was ever going to teach him a lesson. In a pre-season friendly in July 2011, Balotelli was played through on goal one-on-one with the keeper. Instead of taking a normal shot, he decided to attempt a pirouette back-heel trick shot that rolled wide. Roberto Mancini was so furious, he immediately substituted him after just 30 minutes, with Balotelli giving his manager what looked like an Italian salute before storming off to the bench. Football should always be serious, and if you have a chance to score, you should score, Mancini said afterward. Balotelli's excuse? He claimed he heard a whistle and thought he was offside. His own teammate, Micah Richards, wasn't entirely convinced. Then came the fireworks incident. In October 2011, firefighters were called to Balotelli's £3 million Cheshire home after fireworks went off in his bathroom, causing £400,000 worth of damage. Balotelli claimed his innocence. According to him, a friend set off the fireworks in the bathroom while they were outside. "I didn't know anything about it until I heard shouting coming from the bathroom," he said. True or not, the irony got thicker when he became Manchester's ambassador for fireworks safety. The real masterpiece and grand finale was the "Why Always Me" shirt reveal after scoring against Manchester United the very next day. It was performance art at its finest. Balotelli scored some goals, and even though he never really reached his full footballing potential, when it came to creating headlines, he was world-class. The chaos and creativity was endless, and somehow City kept playing him because when the madness worked, it was beautiful. He proved that football could be art, comedy and tragedy, all at the same time.
Craig Bellamy. This guy treated football matches as if they were ongoing disputes with everyone in the stadium, including his own teammates. Bellamy's talent was undeniable, but his constant chatter was like having a football-obsessed parrot on the pitch, never bloody quiet. He could curl in a beautiful winner and spend the celebration telling everyone what they'd done wrong. The golf club incident with John Arne Riise became Premier League folklore. During a training camp in Portugal before a Champions League match against Barcelona in 2007, old grudges surfaced. Months earlier, Riise had skipped Liverpool's Christmas party, claiming he had to fly to Norway, but teammates found out that no flights were available that day, which exposed his lie. Now, during a team karaoke night, his punishment was to sing a Christmas song. When he refused, Bellamy lost it completely. "I knocked on his door, no answer. I knocked on the door again, and the door was partially open," Bellamy later revealed. "I came in, turned the light on, and swore a hell of a lot at him. I smacked him across the legs." Riise described waking up to find Bellamy standing over his bed with an 8-iron, taking swings at his legs. Days later against Barcelona, Bellamy scored and celebrated by mimicking a golf swing. The audacity was beautiful. Then came the twist. Bellamy assisted Riise's winning goal, and the pair celebrated together like nothing had happened, jumping all over each other. Riise later admitted he found the golf celebration deeply disrespectful. But in that moment of scoring the winner, pure instinct took over. Football's most toxic partnership had somehow delivered Liverpool's biggest result of the season. Bellamy was fined £80,000 by Liverpool, but avoided being sacked. His career was brilliant and chaotic. He scored crucial goals for Wales, tormented Premier League defences with his pace, and somehow maintained a reputation as both a model professional and a complete nightmare to manage.
Paulo Di Canio. Here was a man whose reputation preceded him into every stadium, and it wasn't always for the right reasons. His skills were magical, and that volley against Wimbledon is still one of the most beautiful goals ever scored in English football. But Di Canio's weirdness went way beyond his ability to make footballs do impossible things.
The referee push at Sheffield Wednesday became an instant legend. When referee Paul Alcock showed him a red card, Di Canio responded by shoving the official so hard that Alcock stumbled backward like he'd been hit by a truck. 11-match ban, but Di Canio had given the fans a moment they'd never forget. Di Canio's political views made his on-field antics look tame. His public support for fascist ideology wasn't subtle, creating a jarring contrast between the beauty he created on the pitch and his controversial statements off it. At West Ham, he became a cult hero despite the controversies. His technique was so pure that fans were torn between admiration for his footballing artistry and discomfort with his political positions. But then there was December 2000 against Everton. With the score tied 1-1 and 5 minutes remaining, Everton goalkeeper Paul Gerrard collapsed injured outside his penalty area. The ball floated into the box toward Di Canio, who had a clear chance to finish into a relatively empty net and win the game. Instead, he caught the ball with his hands, stopping play so Gerrard could receive treatment. His manager, Harry Redknapp, wanted to kill him afterward, and Stuart Pearce was reportedly ready to rip his head off, but Di Canio later received the FIFA Fair Play Award from the very goalkeeper he'd helped. It was the perfect Di Canio paradox. A man who could push referees and make fascist salutes could also show such pure sportsmanship that left everyone speechless. He proved that footballing genius and personal conduct don't always align, but sometimes, just sometimes, even the most controversial players can catch you off guard in the most beautiful way possible.
Luis Suarez, a master craftsman who occasionally turned into a wild animal mid-performance. His technique was flawless, his finishing was surgical, and his work rate was inhuman. But every few months, he'd do something so bizarre that it made you question whether football was even a sport anymore, let alone if Suarez actually was human. The biting incidents became his calling card. Giorgio Chiellini's shoulder at the 2014 World Cup was just the most famous victim. Suarez had been biting opponents since his Ajax days like some sort of footballing vampire. It wasn't aggression in the traditional sense. It was something primal and weird that no one could explain. Then came the racism controversy with Patrice Evra. The back and forth, the denials, the t-shirt support from Liverpool teammates that aged poorly. Suarez handled it terribly, the club handled it worse, and the whole thing became a masterclass in how not to manage a crisis. But here's the thing, when Suarez was just playing football, he was absolutely magnificent. That season when he nearly dragged Liverpool to the title almost single-handedly was one of the greatest individual performances in Premier League history. 31 goals, countless assists, and moments of pure magic that made you forget about the controversy. Suarez combined sublime footballing ability with moments of complete madness that made no logical sense. He was Liverpool's best player and biggest problem at the same time.
Jamie Vardy. This guy's pre-match routine reads like a medical experiment designed to give someone a heart attack. While every other Premier League player is eating quinoa and drinking green smoothies, Vardy's preparing for 90 minutes of football by downing Red Bulls and consuming enough caffeine to power a small city. In his earlier days, Vardy had a 3-litre bottle of vodka at home where he'd dissolve red and purple Skittles, only those colours, because he didn't fancy the others. He'd let them sit for weeks until they completely dissolved, creating what he called his Skittles vodka. It was like something a teenager would concoct in their parents' garage, except this teenager was about to become one of England's most lethal strikers. During Leicester's title-winning season, Vardy drank port wine the night before every game. He'd sip it while watching TV because it tasted like Ribena and helped him sleep. I can't say why it started because I genuinely don't know, but I decided to drink a glass of port on the eve of every game in the 2015-16 season, he wrote in his autobiography. The best part? It worked. Vardy scored in 11 consecutive Premier League matches, broke records, won the title, and did it all while following a diet that would hospitalise most normal humans. His teammate Richie Dillette revealed that the night before Vardy broke Ruud van Nistelrooy's consecutive scoring record, he finished an entire bottle of port. Vardy ended the season on 24 league goals and later became the oldest player to win the Golden Boot for most goals scored in a Premier League season. It's a story that proves how the best man management strategy to make players flourish is simply letting players be themselves.
Dennis Bergkamp. Watching him play was like witnessing pure poetry written with a football. But ask him to get on a plane and he'd rather retire than step foot near the boarding gate. The man who could make impossible first touches look effortless had one weakness that would define his entire career. He was absolutely terrified of flying. This wasn't just mild discomfort, this was a full-blown psychological meltdown that developed during his time at Inter Milan. The phobia reached absurd levels during matches. Bergkamp would literally look up at the sky during games to check weather conditions, worrying about the flight home while he was supposed to be playing football. This obsessive perfectionist, who would get upset at the slightest training imperfection and demanded absolute precision in every pass, couldn't control his terror of flying. Arsenal basically redesigned their entire European campaign around one man's fear of planes. Kitman Vic Akers became Bergkamp's designated road trip companion, driving him thousands of miles across Europe in a minivan, while the rest of the team flew. When negotiating his Arsenal contract, if Bergkamp asked for £1 million, the club would automatically deduct £100,000 because you don't fly, and he accepted it without complaint. Bergkamp has ruled out ever managing Arsenal, his beloved club, where he's immortalized with a statue, because the job would require flying to scout players. According to Bergkamp himself, the phobia came from those miserable flights with Inter Milan. Small, cramped planes that shook constantly through clouds, leaving him claustrophobic and terrified. Sometimes the most brilliant minds carry the deepest fears, and Dennis Bergkamp proved that even footballing gods can be grounded by something as simple as being 30,000 feet in the air.
Faustino Asprilla. This man lived every day like he was starring in his own surreal reality show, with each moment carefully crafted to bewilder and amuse in equal measure. When Newcastle signed him in 1996, they thought they were getting a talented Colombian striker. What they actually got was a walking, talking, wine-drinking enigma who would redefine what it meant to be unpredictable. Asprilla's Newcastle debut perfectly captures his essence. He'd flown in from Italy that morning, had a glass of wine on the team bus because he wasn't expecting to play, then came on as a substitute to completely change the game. The twist? Asprilla genuinely believed Newcastle was a beach town. When they told me I was going to be in a city by the sea, I thought, great, I'm going to be on the beach. I'm going to be sailing yachts. But it turned out the sea there is really dangerous. His teammate Keith Gillespie confirmed that Asprilla once arrived with snorkel and flippers, ready for his seaside adventure. After retirement, Asprilla's eccentricity reached legendary status. In 2014, he launched his own line of flavored condoms called Tino, with guava being his personal recommendation. We had a guava tree in our garden, and that's a flavor and aroma that's very good for romancing, he said. From footballer to contraceptive entrepreneur, only Asprilla could make that career pivot seem logical. For someone launching a romance business, Asprilla seemed to have missed the memo about making love instead of war. In 2008, he was arrested for allegedly spraying 29 bullets at a private security checkpoint near his farm, but perhaps the most Asprilla story of all was the Darlington saga in 2002. Chairman George Reynolds paraded him before 5,163 fans, offered £17,000 per week plus a car and flat, believing the contract was signed. Instead, Asprilla caught a flight to the Middle East without saying goodbye, leaving Reynolds absolutely gutted and swearing never to speak to him again. Most retired footballers struggle with what to do with their free time. Asprilla's solution was apparently collecting automatic weapons and ghosting lower league clubs. Genuine weirdness is when you can be making flavored condoms while starting a machine gun shootout, and no one really bats an eye.
Ali Dia. The greatest scam in Premier League history. Somehow he managed to fool Graham Souness completely. It's so absurd it's hard to believe it's true. In November 1996, Dyer convinced Southampton's manager that he was George Weah's cousin, and that the Ballon d'Or winner from 1995 had personally recommended him.
Souness received a phone call from someone claiming to be Weah himself, recommending his cousin, who had allegedly played for Paris Saint-Germain and represented Senegal 13 times. None of this was true. Souness invited Dia to train with Southampton, presumably thinking, if George Weah says he's good, he must be good. Souness and Southampton were desperate for players, and on the back of one simple training session, they made the decision to actually give Dia his Premier League debut as a substitute against Leeds United on November 23, 1996. The problem was that Dia couldn't actually play football at Premier League level at all. When he came on for the injured Matt Letitia after 32 minutes, it became immediately obvious that this wasn't George Weah's cousin. This was barely anyone's cousin who'd ever seen a football before. Southampton legend Matt Letitia later described watching, saying, "He ran around the pitch like Bambi on ice. It was very, very embarrassing to watch." Dia lasted 53 minutes before Souness realised he'd been deceived and went on to substitute his own substitute. It was the shortest Premier League career in history. Dia had basically walked off the street, convinced a Premier League manager he was related to one of the world's best players, and got a debut. The identity of the mystery caller was never definitively established. Dia remains the gold standard for football fraud. Obviously, the best skill in football isn't what you do with your feet, it's having a deluded belief in your own ability.
Mido, the living proof that football talent and body management don't always go hand in hand. The Egyptian striker had the technical ability to play for top European clubs, but he also had the dietary discipline of someone who'd never heard of a salad. At his heaviest during his playing career, Mido reportedly weighed around 107 kilograms, spread across his 6'2" frame. While he was still a capable footballer, you couldn't help but wonder what he might have achieved with a bit more discipline. At Tottenham, Mido could produce moments of pure magic. His touch was delicate, his vision was excellent, and his finishing could be clinical. But then he'd spend the next 10 minutes looking exhausted. His stats tell the story perfectly. In his best season at Tottenham in 05-06, Mido scored 11 goals in 27 games, making him the club's second highest goalscorer, despite clearly not being at peak physical condition. His talent shone through regardless. Mido could be carrying extra weight and still score goals that other strikers couldn't manage at peak fitness. He was like a football magician whose greatest trick was making you forget he wasn't maximizing his potential. But the real problems came after retirement. Mido's weight ballooned to 150 kilograms, and doctors told him he had more than an 80% chance of dying before age 40 if he continued his lifestyle. The wake-up call came when he couldn't walk 300 yards on a beach without having to sit down for 30 minutes. "I've totally transformed my lifestyle. I don't eat any bad carbs, I don't eat anything fried at all, and I don't eat any red meat," he revealed after losing 37 kilograms in just 5 months. While he couldn't reclaim his footballing career, he proved that with enough determination, you can completely transform yourself at any stage of life. His story shows that wasted potential in one chapter doesn't have to define the entire book.
Sebastian Coates. This guy turned defending into performance art, and not the good kind. The Uruguayan centre-back had a unique talent for making routine defensive situations look like they were being performed by someone who was just returning from a 5-day bender in Ibiza, but was giving it their best shot anyway. Coates' reputation was built on spectacular defensive errors. His real talent was for turning calm moments into absolute chaos. A simple clearance would become a pinball machine sequence, and teammates would hold their breath whenever the ball came near him. Coates wasn't a bad defender in the traditional sense. He could make tackles, win headers, and even play decent passes. He just had this supernatural ability to find the most creative ways to help the opposition create chances. The perfect character defect to Coates and his chaos came against QPR in March 2012. When a corner was half cleared to the edge of the penalty area, Coates met it with a scissor kick that rocketed into the top corner. A goal so spectacular that Liverpool fans still call it one of the greatest strikes they've ever seen. It was beautiful. A centre-back known for defensive chaos, suddenly pulling off an acrobatic finish that would make any striker jealous. Of course, Liverpool then surrendered a 2-0 lead to lose 3-2, which perfectly summed up the Coates experience at Liverpool. Some were lovably chaotic, others were brilliantly troubled, but they all prove that the Premier League's greatest asset isn't just the quality of football, it's the unforgettable characters. Behind the glamour and the goals, football remains unpredictable, and that's what makes it beautiful. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the weird, wonderful, and completely mental side of football.